So this will be part two of a three-part series on polygamy. And this is in response to the first video I did. I had a lot of people telling me that they liked it and they wanted more. There's only so much in the Bible you can really talk about until you start becoming redundant, but you can attack it from three different ways, which I chose to do. So this will be part two. It shouldn't be too long. And I would like to start out by saying that, would God use a metaphor to describe a relationship he has that's sin? Would he? He does, but it's not sin, and that's my point. So I'm going to do a little reading today. I can't just talk off the top of my head because I want to address stuff specifically from the Bible. But there's a little story in Ezekiel about God, and God refers to himself as a polygamist. And so let's end this whole polygamy is allowed but not condoned, or another argument is God tolerated the sin of polygamy. God doesn't tolerate sin. Neck collar, if you're questioning and wondering, I was in 2 rear-end car collisions last year. I had a herniated disc that progressively got worse to the point that my arm barely works. So had surgery a week ago. I'm feeling way better. Anyway, so did you know that God calls himself or refers to himself as a polygamist? The answer is yes, he does. So in Ezekiel, it starts out 23:1. It says, "The word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, there were 2 women, daughters of one mother, and they committed whoredoms in Egypt, and they committed whoredoms in their youth, and there were their breasts pressed, and they were bruised. There they bruised the teats of their virginity. And the names of them were Eloah, the elder, and Holibah, her sister, and they were mine." 2 sisters, born of the same mother. God says they were mine. And they bear sons and daughters, and thus were their names. Samaria is Eloah, and Jerusalem Aholibah. I don't know if I'm getting those correct or not, but you get the point. "So the Lord said, Moreover unto me, Son of man, wilt thou judge these 2?" And he says, and declare their abominations. And then in Ezekiel 23:37, it says, "They have committed adultery." The only way you can commit adultery is if you are married. "And blood is in their hands. With their idols have they committed adultery, and they have caused their sons, whom they bear unto me," God, "to pass for them through the fire, to devour them. And they say, if a man put away his wife, and she go from him and become another man's, shall he return again? Well, the law says that's a no-no. Shall not the land be greatly polluted? But thou hast played the harlot with many lovers, yet return unto me again, saith the Lord." And Jeremiah, you go into Jeremiah 3:6, and it says, the Lord said also unto me in the days of Josiah the king, Thou hast seen that which backsliding Israel has done. She has gone up upon every high mountain and every green tree, and has played the harlot. And I said, after she had done these things, Turn thou unto me, but she returned not. And her treacherous sister Judah saw it." So here reiterating the fact that there's the 2 sisters. And I saw, when all the cause whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery, I had put her away. So he divorced her and given her a bill of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah feared not, who went and played the harlot also. "Behold, the days come, saith..." No, I want to stop there for a second. So I've established the fact that God himself is supposedly speaking here. He says that there's 2 sisters. He identifies the sisters, and he says that they're his. They bear him children. This is a polygamist relationship. I have had people tell me, "Yeah, but they didn't have sex." Like, it's a metaphor. Duh. But why would God identify as a polygamist if polygamy was wrong? That's my whole point. Oh, now we're getting to something else here, which you'll just love. So, God made a covenant with Israel and Judah. Yes? They broke that covenant, correct? Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. A new covenant? A new testament? Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day they took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which covenant they break, although I was a husband unto them. It doesn't get any plainer. He was a husband unto them. Plural. Polygamy. Get over it. But this shall be the covenant that I will make with them, with the house of Israel. After those days, saith the Lord, I will put my law in their inward parts, and write them in their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. This is the new covenant. The new covenant is a polygamist covenant. Mind blow! If you are a Christian, and you talk about the New Testament and the Old Testament, well, guess what? The New Testament is a polygamist covenant. You don't know what to think, do you? But I love reading the Bible. And they shall no more teach every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall know me from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. It's a new covenant. So God describes his relationship with Israel and Judah as polygamist relationship, with him being the husband. Once more, this new covenant, or New Testament, is based on polygamy. Read the last two verses. I don't know how you're going to get around that. You might ask me then, why I always seem to be talking about polygamy? Good question. Well, here's the answer. The nature of man is not monogamous, and not all men are worthy of even one wife. Some guys are just douchebags. They are not husband material. So, hooking up with multiple women degrades the value of women, and I hope you ladies understand this. And marrying and divorcing one at a time does the same thing. You may have not had two wives at the same time, but if you've been married and divorced a couple of times, you're a polygamist. You are, especially if you have children. You have a lifetime bond with these women. You just stop having sex and living with them, but they're still your wives. So, the day and age where haughty women and independent women these independent women today, they're all haughty and they talk trash about men and all that. I got one verse for you. Isaiah 4:1. God is going to humble you. You high-minded, stuck-up, quite honestly, some of you women are just outright bitches. God has a plan to straighten your butts out, and it's called polygamy. Isaiah 4:1, read it. Read that whole chapter. So, not only is polygamy in the future, polygamy is now in the form of the new covenant, because God says that he did that covenant with Israel and Judah. That is polygamist. That is the new covenant. Get over it. Am I saying everybody should run out and get another wife? Hell no. Hell no. Don't do that. If you can't manage one woman, you can't manage two or more. If you can't financially handle one woman in one family, you can't handle more than one. It is not for everybody, but that doesn't mean it isn't for anybody. And that's the big kicker. If you understand the natural order of marriage and what constitutes marriage, for example, who are concubines? The Bible talks often about concubines. Who are concubines? What are they? What's their function? What's their purpose? Putting value on virginity, again, instead of being embarrassed to be a virgin, would really go a long way to improving our lives. Giving proper perspective on what actually is adultery and what is premarital sex. Is there even such a thing? Hint, there is no premarital sex. When you have sex, you are one flesh. One flesh. You can't undo that. If you have a hooker, one flesh. If you're a hooker, then you have one flesh with many men. It's not a good thing to have multiple men like that. It may not make any sense to you, but polygamy brings everything into perspective. Understanding the Bible's order on sex and marriage, how marriage actually works. And you will never have a fulfilling life doing things a non-biblical way. And I think that's the biggest problem with people is, they don't read their Bible, or they just read bits and pieces. And so when they hear things that are contrary to what they've been taught, their brain goes tilt. And polygamy is one of those biggest ones. If you notice in the New Testament, like Jesus, when he talks about adultery, he doesn't change the command, he intensifies it. Hating your brother, he doesn't change the command, he intensifies it. Like murder. If you hate your brother without cause, it's murder. So he intensifies the law. And what I like about polygamy is it, combined with a few other things, polygamy answers a lot of problems. It answers a lot of the baser urges of man to procreate with more than one woman. It alleviates a lot of that because you are allowing a man to do it responsibly. And there is no greater respect and honor than doing something responsibly and honorably. Sneaking around behind people's backs and lying and deceiving people and using people is wrong. Polygamy is not wrong. Just like hating your brother intensifies what murder is, or Jesus talking about adultery and divorcing your wife. God hates divorce. He never said he hated polygamy, but he hates divorce, and it's horrible. So when you address polygamy, only the greatest and finest of men can pull it off. And polygamy highlights whatever problems you have as a polygamist, you have as a monogamist with just one wife. So it amplifies and intensifies everything. In order to be a really good polygamist, you have to be a really, really good monogamist. So again, I'm not telling everybody to run out and have multiple wives, but just be aware that it takes an exceptional it takes an exceptional man to do that. So I just had some stuff down here. So the next thing I wanted to address is the one man, one woman argument. And it's a flawed argument, and I want to expose why. So in Genesis, it says that God took a rib out of a man, made the woman, and then it says a man will leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. Well, wonderful. And then so people will go say, see, God created one man and one woman. Be careful when you use that argument, because God also created us naked, and I don't see anybody running around naked. But that isn't my argument. So, a few thoughts. If you use this to condemn polygamy, you defy God's law. God's law does not forbid polygamy. So, in the New Testament, it says the law is spiritual, and the law defines what sin is. So if the law doesn't say something is sin, guess what? It's not. And if you claim that God then condoned sin instead of condemning it, um, how can you possibly, I just, why would God allow sin? That makes him a wicked man, or a wicked thing, because I just don't get it. All right, so here's my big kicker. If you claim the one man, one woman thing because God only made Adam and Eve, you have a real big problem, because now you have to also say that God, from the beginning, instituted incest as God's standard. You have to. You can't separate those. You can't say, oh, well, the law forbids incest. Okay, well, the law doesn't forbid polygamy, so what's your point? But what I'm getting here is that, they say the law of first mention, or, that's the way God established it. Well, great. One man, one woman, have sex with your brothers and sisters. That's the way God did it. If God didn't intend for us to have incest, he would have made more than one woman, right? Or more than one man. Or maybe he could have created 10 people. It says that he created 2. So be very careful when you claim the one man, one woman thing based on creation, because then you are also by default saying incest is God's original institution, because if he wanted it any other way, he would have made it so. See how that works? Don't do that. One flesh. So we read the verse here about, leaving the father and mother, and they twain shall be one flesh. See, that's marriage. One man, one woman. Hold on again. Be careful. If you go into 1 Corinthians 6:16, it says, what, know ye not that he which is joined to a harlot is one body? For the two, saith he, shall be one flesh. See, you can go with a hooker and be one flesh with a hooker. You could be one flesh with a lot of women. So that's a bad argument. Please don't do that. You look stupid. So, husband of one wife. I hear these arguments. Before that, though, Jesus, one of the other arguments, they say, oh, adultery. If you look upon a woman with lust, you commit adultery. That's not true. That's not true. And I'm not saying Jesus is a liar. I'm just saying you don't understand what Jesus was saying. The whole context is adultery. So if you look at a single woman and you're unmarried, let's say, you're an unmarried man, you got the hots for an unmarried woman. Are you committing adultery by looking at her with lust? You want her. You want her to be your wife or potential wife. How can that possibly, that doesn't even fall under the definition of adultery. Now, if you're a married man and you look at a single woman and you lust after her, are you committing adultery? Half of you just said yes. That's not true. The Bible, the law defines sin. Remember that. So does the law say a man can have more than one wife? Yes? All right, then that's not adultery. Adultery is defined as a woman that is married having sex with another man. That is the biblical definition of adultery. So if you follow that through, if you're a married man and you look at a married woman and you lust after her, now are you committing adultery in your heart? Absolutely. This isn't rocket science. It's really not that hard. So husband of one wife. So we have a command in 1 Timothy. It says a bishop must be blameless, the husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, good, blah, blah, blah. Now, I know there's people that get into the Greek and say that that's the husband of a first wife. Some say that the translation isn't great, but it works. Some say that this just means that you have to be married. I will accept that it means the husband of one wife. I'm good with that. But that doesn't mean that the average person cannot have more than one wife. If you're dedicated to the ministry and you have 6 wives and 30 children, I don't know how you could possibly focus on the ministry. If you had 3 wives and 15 children, I don't know how you could possibly focus on the ministry. So I think this, for ministers, is a very good restriction. Very good, because it's good for the church. But this, because it's good for the church, don't mean it's good for a society as a whole. And I think that's the mistake a lot of people make. Kings. So there was a prohibition for kings. It was more of a kind of a warning, I guess. But in Deuteronomy, it says that thou shalt in any wise set a king over thee, whom the Lord shall choose, one from amongst the brethren. But then he goes on to say, but he shall not multiply horses to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt, to the end that he should multiply horses, for as much as henceforth return no more this way. So now you've got horses. Don't multiply horses. Does that mean that the king couldn't have any horses? No. And then in the next verse it says, neither shall he multiply wives to himself, that his heart turn not away, neither shall he greatly multiply himself silver or gold. Does any of this mean that he can't have more than one horse? No. Does it mean that he can't have more than one wife? No. Does it mean that he can't have more than one piece of silver or gold? No. So why do you guys try and pull the multiplying wives out and separate that from the verse above and verse below? It's stupid. It is absolutely stupid. There is no prohibition against adding, and there's a difference between adding and multiplying. You know, if he wanted a few wives, have at it. The problem is with kings in Israel, God did not want them commingling with other nations, and it was customary to make peace between nations is you would marry a daughter. And so when you got a bunch of tribes and a bunch of nations or whatever, you know, they're all passing their daughters off, and it was not uncommon to have many, many wives. And the whole function of that was for peace. And God did not want Israel covenant, you know, tying together with these other nations, because those other nations didn't worship God or Jehovah. That was the function, and that was the reason for not multiplying wives. But remember, you're not supposed to multiply horses or your silver and gold either. Can you have more than one horse? Yes. Can you have more than one piece of silver and gold? Yes. Can you have more than a wife as a king? Yes. Get over it. Good grief. So, final thoughts. People don't take the Bible as a whole book, and few really understand the law, that it defines sin. They always, oh, we're not under the law, and they just don't give much attention to the fact that the law defines sin. As such, the Bible is based upon this as a fact. Sin is the transgression of the law. If it isn't a sin in the law, it's not sin. It is not forbidden in the law. If it's not forbidden in the law, it is not sin. The New Testament amplifies what sin is. It doesn't create new sins. Adultery, for example, is amplified. It's not changed, it's amplified. If you lust after a married woman in your heart, you've already sinned. It's adultery. You cannot look upon an unmarried woman and commit adultery, even if you're married. I talked about this. You have to show in the law that it's a sin first before trying to condemn somebody for being a sinner. Some twisted attempts to justify imaginary rules or doctrines and to use these principles as tactics, like the law of first mention, or claiming something as sin even though a text that you claim implies something is, without it actually claiming it. In other words, you know, like Adam and Eve, one man, one woman, and then they try and take that as a principle or as an example and turn that into a rule or a law. That's what I'm saying. And there's implicit and explicit stuff, and the explicit always trumps the implicit. If I say don't eat chicken, that is a command. If I say I don't really like chicken, and then you take and twist that implied statement as a command, it just doesn't hold the same water. Do you follow me? So the Trinity doctrine is another one. The Trinity is not taught in the Bible. Man afterwards has created this doctrine, very elaborate over many years to try and make it fancy. But the bottom line is it's not taught by Jesus. It ain't taught in the Old Testament. It's not taught in any of the epistles. So, and yet most claim it's fundamental to the Christian faith. I don't believe that there's three gods in one. I don't, because the Bible doesn't teach that. You're taking stuff and implying that that's what it teaches, but the writers did not outright say that, so I don't say that. I'm body, soul, and spirit, and I'm made in the image of God, so I believe that God is body, soul, and spirit. Does that mean that I'm three distinct, separate, individual people? No, and neither does God. I choose what the Bible writers say over what you say the Bible writers say. How's that?